Hi, my name is Mark Hosking. I'm CEO and founder of Formbird. We're about to kick off this new project, and I'd love to give you a quick overview of what Formbird is about, what we can achieve, and how we're going to achieve this. So what I'd like to do is firstly start with a quick demonstration of Formbird in operations, giving you some ideas of how we progress through the project. The first thing is, let's have a look at the user interface. What does Formbird actually look like, and how do we interact with it? So let's log into an application here. This is an application for inspections. It has assets, it has inspection processes. So this is an inspection application that looks at hydrant inspections. So let me just log in. And as we log in, we simply enter an email address. And we log in. When we're presented with what we term our home screen. You can always return back to this home screen by selecting on your home button. This is changeable, and you can set that up on a per user basis, so you can always default back to a known location. We also, along the top bar here, have a search bar. In that search bar, you can just perform generic or general searches. So let's say I wish to search for an asset, and that asset I know is asset number 00980. I will then find that, and it is actually a hydrant. Similarly, I could have entered or searched for it based on George Street. The database is fully indexed, and I'll now return all items in George Street, whether they be the assets or inspections or whatever they might be. I can then very quickly go to that item by simply collecting on it. Here I'm presented with a combination of information. What this is termed is a Formbird form. This area is known as a Formbird form. On that form, we have what's called components. So this is a mapping component. These are various field components. So we might have a number component, textual components. There might be list components. In this case, a list of items relating to this asset. So in this inspection, this is an inspection of the asset, and that's asset 980 at 38 George Street. So we have a form and we have components. Formbird is actually a platform which lets you build your own application. So we start with a number of components, and they get assembled together to form complex applications. Putting those components together is relatively simple and easy, and I'll give a little demonstration in a few minutes on exactly how that is done. But first, let's just further explore what an application may look like. So let's go back to our home page. So our home page may consist of a number of menu items, and we can drive or navigate to those. We may have some graphical representation of data, maybe, and it'll typically be relevant to what that home page is representing. You as an operator may have, or user or supervisor or administrator, may have one or more home pages or navigation pages. These pages will contain relevant data to the application or the function that you're trying to perform at that point in time. You might be looking at it from a point of view of inspections, critical outstanding works, assets that need further investigation. It really is dependent. And those dashboards are usable by yourself, or they may be in fact shared, or they may be very specific to a user and the details relevant to that. So it really depends on how it's configured, how you operate as an organization, and how the various departments may operate. Here we are actually presented below with a number of further dashboards or reports that are relevant. So I may in fact I may look at one of these, and that'll include potentially images. So here we have images as a result of these inspections. At any point in time, I can actually drill down and go into the actual inspection, typically, and that'll then again contain many components. So those components may have an address component with a map. may have various functional components for which I can select an item, change that item. You'll also notice that up in the left-hand corner here, because I made a change, that little tick box, which is the save button, has now been activated. It's saying something has changed on this form. If you wish to save it, you're going to need to press the save button. I don't want to save that, so I'll simply refresh. Other sort of features and functions of Formbird, you'll notice that what we call the command bar or control bar will change. That'll change to give you functions like create new, save, or just the item name. In this case, it's a menu, so it has no concept of or no need to have a save button or any other sort of functional behavior. Yet when I go into perhaps an item, it will actually contain more functionality than just, so if I go back to 00980, we'll go back to that hydrant, you'll see that it may have other functions. So this is the new button. If delete is enabled, you can delete. You may want to attach an image to that, and you can attach an image to the actual record. You can also attach images directly to the various functions within that form. So we have a component which lets you upload documents, and that can include images, as we've seen in the inspections. Okay, so let's look at a typical workflow in, say, the water industry. Here what we're presented with is a call-taking screen. So this is the call-taking screen within Focus 3. It's for the operational call center or control center. It consists of a map and an address search capability. It also consists a list of, in this case, hotkeys. These hotkeys perform specific functions and pre-build work. These are the sort of top 10, top 8 functions that an operator may wish to perform. We also have currently open work so that we can locate existing work, so that if a caller is coming in, we can actually identify and not create a new one, and either add notes or refer the caller back to that existing work. So let's enter a location. In this case, we'll select a location. Here we are presented with a map that contains existing work. It's got the critical assets that I'm looking at. So in this case, it has the water and sewer assets. It also has the shut-off blocks that will be shut off, or the properties that will be shut off, which is termed a shut-off block, based on isolating that specific property. We can actually drill down and inspect the specific assets. So if I hover over any of these, I can in this case drill down to the asset details. The asset details here is a water pipe. This water pipe contains specific asset information that's actually come from the asset system, or the base information actually from the GIS, the graphical information system. We have the geospatial details, so the actual line details. We also, in this case, have the shut-off block details. So what actually what properties are actually part of this shut-off block associated with this asset. And we also have specific repairs, in this case, or actions that have occurred against that specific water pipe. In the Focus 3 application, we have two principal pieces of information or objects. One is we term a case, and the other is an action. A case is the problem that's been requested. Now that can be requested from an external source. It might be what we term a reactive case or responsive case, or coming from an internal request. It could be a case for a facility or any above ground assets, and they could be planned work, not reactive work. Underneath each case, you then have what we term actions. And actions is an element of work that we wish to record and track. So we might wish to, an action, typical actions might be an investigate action, might be a repair action, and those repair actions may be very specific. So it'll be a water repair, it'll be a sewer repair, it may be a specific inspection. By actually bringing our actions to become very, very specific, we can minimize the amount of data that field crew have to enter, or anyone has to enter and maintain, and it's very specific around the data that is required for that function or that process, that business process. A typical environment for a water company would consist of, say, 4 to 6 cases and maybe 60 or 70 different actions. Some of those actions may be relatively generic, like investigate, which will have generic information which will lead on to, and it'll be a process-based. You may have an action which is an OH&S type action. That might be for confined space entry, for instance. And the confined space entry action will contain a whole lot of processing around who can create a confined space entry action, the actual permissions, the entry and exit alarming, and all sorts of processes that really are about managing that confined space entry and OH&S functionality. And then you'll have your repair type actions. So they're really broken down between asset-based information and activity-based information. But the idea is to paint a very simple and clear picture of what has occurred for any particular work against any particular asset. This gives us a very good overview and a very in-depth knowledge of what work has been done and performed on what assets over extended periods of time. Leveraging and utilising images and photos are very much part of the Formbird platform, as I've shown already. A number of our customers request that field crew or demand the field crew put in up to, say, 6 to 8 photos to really document clearly the asset at that point in time, which can give a fantastic history of both the asset quality but also of any issues that may arise after the work has been performed. So let's now have a look at one of those case and action. So let's drill down to a specific case. So here we have is a responsive case that's been classified as a water fault. Under that specific case, you then have the option to both view existing actions as well as add additional details that are relevant. You'll see also that because it's a water fault, we now have more information starting to appear about and it's now only a water layer that's being presented. We'll have some generic type date fields, time fields, classifications that are relevant from the perspective, if you like, of the customer, whether that be internal or external. I may have some critical information that is coming from either internally or just being manually entered. In this case, it may be coming from the GIS requesting on critical customers or additional information that may be very relevant to both the call taker and the field crew. We then have potentially some generic or some classifications that'll be then used for the workflow. So here we have, and a typical workflow is really, all works management is like a task. So we really need to know who, what, where, and when. Okay. So here we have a case. That's the what. The when, we have typically a number of times. The who will have an assignee, and that's who it's going to go to. And the when is then not only the start, but then completed and the dates and times that roll through that keep track of all works. In Focus 3, we then have the ability to create the actions. And as I said, the actions are a breakdown between both activity and function. So what I'm actually doing and what is actually needing to be performed. So here I have an investigate, and typically in Focus 3, you'll have an investigate action. You may not. It depends on really your workflow within your business. You can really think of an action as an item of work that you want to track. And it can be very generic or it can be very specific. And as I said, it could be asset related or it could be business function related. So here we have isolate water main. So before I perform any work, I perform a water isolation, which then may in fact track the times and dates that a shut-off block was isolated. This may come into, in Victoria, that comes into the Central Service Commission reporting, and they require in Victoria dates and times to then determine compensation, in fact, for customers. But it also provides feedback functionally back to users in terms of expected on and off times. So this is a very, it's also very customer focused in operationally, because here we can nominate not just when it's going to go off, and we can then nominate when we expect it to come back on again. Now that can be fed back to customers, either through the website, through notifications, through whatever means. So the actions really represent the slices or the activity or tasks that have come against the case. So now we've seen a little bit about the user interface. Let's just have a quick look at what we can do in terms of speed of development or speed of customization or configuration of an environment. What you can think of Formbird as, Formbird is a platform. So like Excel is a platform and you have spreadsheets on it, Formbird is a platform and you have applications on it. And those applications are built through configuration of the data. But we're not limited by very, very simple functionality. You've seen geospatial representation of assets, you've seen all sorts of complex elements that can build up a very detailed application. So let me just go in and perhaps add a little bit of data. In this case, what we'll do is we'll go back to our inspection application here, which actually has some assets in it. So it's got facilities here. So let me have a look at a facility here in Bundaberg. So let me drill down to a specific facility. And let me just say that, let's say that I now am going into the role of a Formbird configurer or designer or builder. Okay, so now I'm going to flick into what is behind the form, which is the template. The template is what defines the form. So what I need to do is I've actually got to go to what we term the actual template. So here we have the ID of the actual template. You'll see that this nav bar is always changing, and that unique ID is changing depending on what's been displayed, and that can be the actual value of the data, or it can be the template itself. In this case, I'm going to the template. Needless to say, all I need to do is, let's say I want to add some checkboxes under the value tags. So maybe I need to put some checkboxes in terms of the criticality of this asset. So let me now go in and edit what is called the template. Now the template is in a format called JSON. It looks a little bit developy, but it in fact is actually relatively easy to read. Simply, we have our components. So the components are those functional elements that sit on every single form. So we have a functional component and we have details on that component. So if I go down and I go and find, in this case, the tags. So I've had a look here and I can see that there's a field here called tags. So here it is, here we go, we've got a field and it's got a label tags. So let me now add in onto there. So what I'll do is I'll go to the Formbird website. And in fact, what I'll do is go to the documentation. And the Formbird documentation has components. So these are a number of our standard type components. So if I want to put a checkbox or checklist against an item, let's say I want to put a checkbox, it'll give me a demonstration of what that checkbox looks like, or a checklist. So I might have some details I want to add that's going to be presented on that form as a checklist. So I simply go to the definition of it. So here is the definition of a checklist that we put it against this specific template. So I'm wanting to put it against the tags. So I want to put a checklist beneath the tag. So firstly, I need to go and find that tags field. I simply now insert. Now, this is just sample. So now we want to see. So we've got the component name, which is checklist. We have the name. Now that's the name that will be stored in the database. So let me put that down as facility importance, or facility features. And what I'll do is then it has a label, and that label is going to be what gets displayed. So this is the name, which is what gets stored into the database, and now the label. The label is what you see naturally on the screen, and that is the label. So I'll change that label to facility features. So let's now give it a few features. So we could say it is above ground, It is made of brick. It contains steel. Okay, so it's a rather silly list, but you get the idea. So on saving that, the next time I go to the form as a user, once I refresh it, it now redefines what that template is and what that form is, and now I have that as a functioning element of the form. Now if I wanted to go and add something else, I'd go back, I'd simply change that, and I'll add timber. I might update the name. I'll refresh. So that is now a new feature or function that is now working on that form, which will now be associated with the sewer facilities. Now, if I was to go back to a existing facility, so I now navigate back, you'll see that it is on that form. It has no data associated with it because it is new. But if I was to update that, I will now be saved against that record, or against that what we term a document. So what I can now do is I'll go and remove this, as this is us playing around a little bit. So I'll remove this off that facility, or that definition, that template. I now save it. I go back, I refresh, and it's gone. So the entire form and the entire applications can be built in the same way, or are built in the same way. We can then add what we term rules, which then perform macro type functions, might be validation, might be sending emails, might be hiding or showing or making something mandatory. So they can be quite complex. They can also be time-based. You might want something to alert someone that it's about to run out of time, or do some other sort of work process. It is that flexibility which gives us the capability to incrementally deploy quite complex applications over a period of time, where you can introduce elements and slowly roll out new features and really roll them out in a very incremental and quite a rapid approach. Very much, I treat it like Lego. So you've got really Lego blocks, you have some Lego structure around it. It might be, you might already have a model that you want to go to, like Focus as an application. You then can add and cut and paste and build up new elements. You can also start building from a very base and using those, what we term the components, to build those complex applications. Okay, so you've seen it operating on a desktop. So let's have a quick little look at it operating on a device like a phone. So Formbird is what's termed responsive design. It actually will respond to the size of the device. So whether it's on a desktop or a phone, the same application, so those same features and functions that I've just added in through the components will fully operate on a phone or a tablet. Okay, so let me just grab my phone and we'll drop across to have a look at it functioning on a phone. So let me log into the phone. So here we are, we're on that inspection application. So we have all the various same elements of it. If I go horizontal, it'll simply flip horizontally. I can go and have a look at the facility list. And as before, I have the maps, I have the list. It'll automatically hide and show columns in the grid for me. So very much behaving like a normal phone app. You can see I have the searching, so I can enter in similarly the 00980, so I can perform the same search, select it, and now I have the details of that asset. Okay, so it really functions on any device, with it automatically reformatting the way it's laid out. So whether I've got images, if I take photos, they're all use the device's phone and use the device's capability in that sense. So let's try and have a look at perhaps something. Let's have a look at whether. So similarly there, I've got the ability to look at those inspections horizontally. So as we build a Formbird application, we're not building a mobile app and a desktop app, we're just building a single application that'll actually function across all environments. This gives us great capability to continually build applications and extend their capability. Okay, so we've seen a little bit about the user interface. We've seen how we can edit and create applications by entering and modifying templates. So how do we progress the project? So it's relatively simple. What we're doing is like building a Lego environment. We're taking those building blocks and we're building out the functions that you require. In a works management application, it's fairly simple. We've got assets on one hand and we've got activity on another. Now that activity includes the tasks that need to be performed. So they'll typically contain all of the details of dates and times and who's going to do it, what they're working on, the asset itself, the details that is required to perform that duty, and to record enough information to go back and record as history against the asset. Against the asset itself, we'll have the details of the asset the data that's coming from the asset register, that's coming from the GIS. So the marrying of those two simple concepts together is really the basis. If we have a look at the application that I've demonstrated so far, that represented a couple of weeks of work. So we're not talking months or years in implementing a Formbird application. We're potentially talking in days and weeks. So what we do is we start very simply. We start with some very simple concepts, and those often become, and there's also generic concepts that will flow all the way through, whether it be the process of assignment, the dates and times that constitute KPI details, or knowledge that helps us better communicate the information from the field to the office, or to the office to administration and accounts. And as you can see, because of that flexibility and speed of implementation and speed of development, nothing is necessarily set in stone. Some very good principles need to be laid, but then as we move forward, they will change over time. But what we can do is very quickly have people interacting with actual applications, and that really then feeds on itself, and the details and requirements will very quickly fall out of that. In fact, all of our Formbird projects, the documentation for the application is the application itself. And we've found that we do the documentation at the end of the project, not during the project, because we can actually develop the application as fast as we could potentially write documentation. So that really lends itself to great flexibility and great capability for you as a business to let it evolve in a very natural way. This can help with change management. This can also make sure it's focused on what is required up front early, and get some real runs on the board really early, get people understanding how it can function and how it can leverage and benefit the business, and then expand it out and build out each of the various areas and requirements. And it will evolve over time, but we'll establish some basic fundamentals. We can take the building blocks from all our applications, whether it be Focus, the works management application, our vehicle tracking, our fleet management application. All of our applications can be brought to bear, and really very much like a spreadsheet, like I spoke earlier, cut and paste to build up an application that contains elements that are all off the shelf as well as fully configured. So this really lends itself to building an application that is owned and run and operated by you as a business. We believe that way you end up with a very powerful, flexible and final solution that is easily adopted by the business, is not in conflict with any terms, because in fact it is a reflection of your business processes and your business data that you need to operate your business. I'd like to thank you, and I really look forward to catching up with you all soon. So get started, give it some thought. Please don't hesitate to contact myself or any of our consultants, and we'll continue to build from this point on. Thank you.